welcome, Francesco. I'm sorry for this delay in setting up the things, but yeah, the connection between Meet and YouTube just broke. We recorded only 3 or 4 seconds in the correct link. But anyways, so we welcome Francesco Greco from the University of Bari. And he is going to present his work on phishing defense using a human-centered artificial intelligence approach. So, yeah, please, Francesco, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So in the meanwhile, I shared the Meet link to my colleagues, so maybe they could.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. I am very happy to be here today as a guest for the UI engineering live talks, and thanks to Davide for hosting me. So I am Francesco Greco, and I work as a member of the IVU lab in the University of Bari, which stands for Interaction, Visualization, Usability, and UX Laboratory. And in the next 30 minutes, I will present to you what is the results of my PhD thesis, more or less, which I got last February, and encompasses, as you will see, many research activities that are also quite diverse, but also, as we say in Italian, bando alle ciance. Yeah, let's start. So, okay, can I change slide? Perfect. Okay, so cybersecurity is more important now than ever as the world moves toward more and more digitalization. And companies invest a lot in terms of efforts and capitals into cybersecurity and technological defense solutions, such as firewalls, antiviruses, intrusion detection system, and so on. And among these solutions, there are also technologies based on artificial intelligence, which are being increasingly adopted thanks to their potential and performance in security scenarios, such as, for example, zero-day attacks. However, despite the plethora of technological solutions, the role of the human is often neglected. And humans are treated as mysteries, like unreliable, unpredictable entities by most organizations. And this can cost companies a high price. In fact, it is estimated that over 2/3 of data breaches happen because of some human element involved. And among these breaches we have in the cyber threats, we have phishing, which is surely one of the most popular attacks in which the human element is involved. And phishing attacks bother us every day, but also pose a serious cybersecurity threat, since criminals send emails, SMSs, instant messages to their victims, and they can gain access to their victims' information or also their devices. Despite having existed for over 3 decades, phishing still remains one of the main attack vectors. But how is this possible? So this is a stat for IBM, and how is this possible that this attack is still so effective? Well, phishing is not just a technical attack, but it also involves social aspects, which leverage universal characteristics of users that are deeply rooted in human nature and are also common among different social and cultural contexts. And moreover, humans are incredibly complex systems, and despite having the best AI-based security systems, we cannot not expect these systems to properly protect users if not adequately designed to encompass these human needs. So we need a more comprehensive approach that looks at both the technical and the human side to achieve a true level of security against phishing. And this is what I tried to do with among the research activities in my PhD by developing this framework, which is called PERSEUS. And this framework naturally resulted from the research activities performed during my PhD under several distinct aspects of user security. And it encompasses 4 main pillars that we will see one by one in the next 20 or so minutes. So this research, just to be clear, places itself at the intersection of three macro areas. We have cybersecurity, human-computer interaction, and artificial intelligence. So while cybersecurity focuses on the defense of cyber-physical assets, the figure of the user is often neglected. And the discipline of usable security across the human-computer interaction and cybersecurity can study the application of principles of human-computer interaction to develop secure systems that are also usable. And on the other hand of the spectrum, we have artificial intelligence, which does not often consider the user's figure. And here, the field of human-centered AI can help us in this sense because it focuses on developing AI systems that are reliable, safe, and trustworthy, and that prioritize human values, needs, and well-being, while also preserving human control over replacement. And so PERSEUS roots itself into these two fields, usable security and human-centered AI, as it focuses on developing anti-phishing systems that are user-centered and also employ AI technologies. So let's start with the first of the four pillars of PERSEUS, which is modeling human vulnerabilities. And vulnerability in phishing contexts is often referred to as human error, but rather than considering it an error, a fault of the user, we should consider it rather a human factor. And there are several human factors that act together and may affect user behavior. So Morpheus is the first Greek god that we will encounter, and is the name of our framework for modeling, measuring, and mitigating human factors in cybersecurity. And with Morpheus, we try to investigate which are the human factors that drive user susceptibility to 6 different cyber threats. Among them, they are phishing and variants, but also malware download, password management, and system misconfiguration. And to find the human factors that cause susceptibilities, we conducted a scoping review of the literature of cybersecurity, but also literature about psychology, by analyzing the results of 6 queries on Google Scholar, and 1 per threat. And we obtained a final set of 93 papers, which define 50 human factors. And these human factors are very varied. We have demographics factors, like age and gender, but also personality traits, like maybe you know the big 5, like extraversion or agreeableness. And then we have cognitive factors like knowledge vigilance, fatigue of the user. Then we have affective factors like shame, but fear, also stress, and also behavioral factors like impulsive behavior and habits, for example, of the user. And finally, also socio-organizational factors like lack of communication between peers and social norms. And here we have, as a result, this mapping of these 50 human factors to the 6 cyber threats. And for example, you can see here for phishing that Morpheus defines, tells us from the literature that emotional factors, affective factors like anxiousness, fear, and stress can affect user susceptibility. But then we also wanted to have a clear picture of not only what we found as individual factors and their effect, but also the interactions among them. And that is how they affect each other. For example, we know from the literature that emotional stress, for example, can affect cognitive fatigue, and which are both human factors in Morpheus. So since the research space would have been too big to search for pairwise interactions among these 50 factors manually, because we will have something like 1,200 queries to run, we use the AI-assisted retrieval with a strong component of human validation. And we finally obtained a set of 310 papers that define 302 interactions, unique pairwise interactions among these factors. And these results led us to validating this theoretical interaction architecture, which we called the causal pathway architecture, where susceptibility, which is here on in layer 3 on the right, is motivated by cognitive, affective, and behavioral factors, which are part of layer 2, which are in turn modulated by the layer 1, the factors in layer 1, which are personality, demographics, and social and organizational factors. And actually, almost 83% of the interactions that we found in the literature from these 302 validated this architecture, this model, and with only a small percentage that mainly defined interactions, inverse interaction, for example, between affective and social factors. So all these interactions were also abstracted in the 12 interaction patterns to model the interaction pathways that were most frequent. And for example, one of these interaction patterns describes how cognitive resources of a user are modulated by their personality and emotions. For example, we have neuroticism, which is a personality trait that amplifies stress, anxiety, and fear, which in turn causes a premature cognitive depletion of resources of user, which leads to phishing susceptibility. And all these interactions were kind of formalized. And finally, we also wanted to, okay, we have all these factors, but how can we measure them? Because we know we need to give practitioners references to standardized techniques to measure these human factors to make the framework actually usable. And we gathered as for each of the factors, we collected measurement tools, and we obtained 99 measurement tools that are presented in Morpheus and can give practitioners access to all these academic references. So at the end, we have Morpheus in its every part. And also in the paper here, we can see operational scenarios, which were some scenarios that we defined to bridge the gap between theory and practice. But I have to skip them for brevity. So all these components of Morpheus represented the first pillar. Let's go on the second pillar, which regards user warnings that are designed with the user in mind and also validated with users. And this is like the front-end part, the component of the software. So before reaching the user's inbox, usually emails are filtered by some security system. Here we can have, for example, AI-based classifiers that can detect phishing emails. And the emails are classified as phishing or genuine with a given confidence. Emails that are surely considered phishing can be filtered out above a certain threshold. And emails that are considered genuine can also be sent to the user's inbox. While for those emails which are in the gray zone and the classification is not clear, we cannot just filter them out because we would risk deleting relevant content for the user. So warnings are employed as a last layer of security, leaving the final decision to read or not the email to the user. The problem is that with these warnings, traditional warning dialogues, the user does not often have the required knowledge to make an informed decision. And the warning dialogue won't explain the reasons why a suspicious email or website is dangerous. So explainable AI can help us in this sense because XAI models can be employed to kind of interpret the results of a classification of an AI system. And we have the problem, however, that output of XAI tools like this one coming from SHAP are not designed for end users, but are meant for developers. Therefore, we risk to be in a situation where, let's say, the inmates are running the asylum. That is, we have AI developers that are designing the user interface without any consideration of the user. An explanation user interface, or XUI, can be defined as the sum of outputs of an XAI system that the user can directly interact with. So an XUI basically, what it do? It basically uses the outputs of explainable AI methods to provide relevant insights for a particular user audience. And since we wanted to investigate these tools, these XUIs, and cover the gap that we have currently between algorithmic explanations, which are usually studied by AI researchers, and human-centered design, which is typically found on in HCI research. We ran a systematic literature review following Kitchenham's protocol. And after this process that looked at both both sides of the literature, human-centered and artificial intelligence, we obtained a final data set of 146 publications, which contain user-evaluated XUIs, or also frameworks used to design XUIs. And from each of these papers, we manually extracted 13 dimensions, because every XUI had, for example, different aspects, both on an algorithmic side, which is an XUI could have an AI model behind, an AI task, like binary classification and so on, but also different human-centered aspects, like, for example, the application domain in which the XUI is used, but also, since they were all validated with a user study, we also gathered the type of user study conducted and the number of participants and so on. And we also collected evaluation constructs for both algorithmic and human-centered aspects. And at the end, we extracted 6 core design guidelines plus 10 design frameworks that can be used to design XUIs. This is Hermes, and Hermes is the name actually of the web platform that we created to help practitioners and developers in designing and evaluating XUIs by navigating the results of our literature review and what we found. So Hermes has 6 entry points, which are basically 6 of the 13 dimensions that we found in our survey, like AI model and so on. And these can help the designer. The designer can actually set all these 6 entry points according to their specific design constraints to obtain guidelines for developing the XUI. And for example, in this case, we can see that here the AI model is the neural network, which does a binary classification, is in a health domain, and will be used by domain experts. That is, health will be practitioners, like clinicians maybe. And in this way, they obtain practical guidelines for their specific case, which also suggests what explanation modality and XAI technique to use. So these 2 fields that were left blank will be filled with the actual modalities and XAI techniques to use. And in our case of anti-phishing measures and how to use Hermes to design them, we can, for example, set as application domain cybersecurity, which is an application domain in Hermes, as AI task binary classification, since the classification is among genuine or email or phishing emails. And as a user type, we can set generic, because we want to design anti-phishing measures for every kind of user. And Hermes will then give us, as AI model, a random forest, a neural network, and suggest others. As XAI models, also it will suggest SHAP, neurons activation, and so on. But also, as explanation modality, will suggest to use either textual or visual explanations. And in Hermes, we also find evaluation strategies like controlled experiment and survey. And these are all based on the literature that was found in our systematic literature review. And so we will also have the scientific references for each of these. And also suggest some design guidelines, like, for example, a careful feature selection to design a proper XUI. So applying findings from Hermes and also the theory of warnings, we came up with this design. And as we can see in this warning, this warning contains an explanation that describes the precise causes of the suspiciousness, let's say, of the email. And the explanation follows a predefined template of 3 sentences. The first one is the feature description. The second one is the hazard explanation. And the third one are the potential consequences. And all these, this template is not just made up, but comes also from theory of warning. So once we had this design, we wanted to evaluate it with users to see whether they are actually effective in protecting them from phishing attacks. So we designed 2 versions of this active warning dialog. Active means that it blocks the user interaction. And one was without an explanation, with just a generic message, and one with explanation. So like the one that I made you see before. So then we also wanted to investigate a second between design factor. This was the first one, with or without explanation. And then another factor was to consider warnings that were shown either before opening an email, like it happens, for example, in modern web browsers when we access a suspicious URL, or after opening an email when clicking on a phishing link. So we wanted to test the effectiveness of the 2. And we basically conducted a controlled experiment with 900 participants, also including 2 baseline conditions. And we used, to measure the effectiveness of the user, we used the click-through rate, which is a metric that describes how often the user just skips the warning dialog. And so we made the user interact in a deceptive-based scenario with 14 emails, which were 11 of them were legitimate, 2 were phishing, and 1 was a false positive. That means that it was a genuine email, but it was shown together with a warning to simulate the case in where the system goes wrong. And the main results tell us that showing warnings after the opening of an email can reduce click-through rate. And that explanations not only reduce click-through rate for true phishing emails, but also increase the click-through rate for false positives. That means that if the system goes wrong, explanations can help the user get some sense of that. Then we also wanted to test whether LLM-generated explanations could be used effectively in warnings in a second study. And we used both Claude and Llama, which is a commercial solution and an open weight solution. And also we tested feature-based and counterfactual explanations. And I will not go into the details, but this was the same exact design. And basically, we discovered that LLM-generated explanations were at least as effective as manually crafted explanations in reducing click-through rate. And also, we discovered that feature-based explanations can be better to discover true positives, while counterfactual explanations can be better in identifying false positives. Okay, and this was another study and another pillar of PERSEUS. These 2 are shorter, and basically the third one is regards the third pillar, regards the technological aspects, the technological implementation of explainable detection with AI models. And well, starting with machine learning plus XAI approaches, we can define this pipeline to arrive starting from a raw email to a warning dialog. So without describing it in the detail, we use basically a feature extraction and an XAI approach to calculate a feature importance vector. And from this feature importance vector, we extract the manual explanation message from a dictionary that contains these manually generated warning messages, and we can inject this warning message within this warning dialog. So regarding the ML model, the study of the optimal ML solutions for phishing detection, we compared 8 machine learning models using a set of 18 explainable features. And we also used Lime and SHAP for model interpretation. So we not only used the traditional machine learning metrics like accuracy, but also we calculated this metric, which is called heterogeneity score, which measures how many features, in average, are relevant according to the feature importance vector. Why this? Because if we have a model that uses different features as the most relevant, and according to the feature importance vector, we will show to the user different explanation messages and reduce what is called the habituation effect in user. So we wanted to have a model that was not only accurate, but also had a quite good heterogeneity score. And we tested different models, and we obtained that explainable boosting machine led to best performance considering both. And also we have that EBM is also explainable by design. So we would not have been happy if we didn't use LLMs. And in fact, we used LLMs to test whether they would be effective in not only classifying phishing emails, but also explaining them to users. Because we would have different advantages with LLMs, like zero-shot prompting and dynamic explanation messages generated, and so on. So Apollo is the name of our tool for phishing detection and explanation generation. And Apollo basically does a similar thing to the machine learning approach, but it does the classification and interpretation together with GPT-4o, which was the best model at the time. And once an email has been classified, it can be starting from the important features. According to GPT-4o, an explanation message can be generated, which is dynamic and has this advantage, and then it can be shown to the user. So Apollo also has the ability of conducting retrieval augmented generation with VirusTotal or domain geolocation, and with this design, it not only using GPT-4o on its own led to decent accuracy in classification based on 4,000 emails, but using retrieval augmented generation from these external information sources, we reached near perfect accuracy. And not only that, but we also conducted an exploratory user study, and we found that warnings generated by Apollo were also more understandable, interesting, and trustworthy than warnings generated manually, which is quite good. So to conclude, this is the last pillar of PERSEUS, which regards adaptive training and simulation. And indeed, if we on the one hand we have that software can be optimized to improve user cybersecurity, there is still all the part of on the user side that can be improved through training and awareness. So currently we have on assessment and mitigation, we have that for assessment, companies typically conduct ethical phishing campaigns. And for mitigation, they conduct phishing training programs. But we have different disadvantages for both. For example, the cost, the ethical problems, the unknown vulnerability causes, because if an employee clicks on an ethical phishing campaign, we do not know the causes that led them to clicking. And also phishing training programs are generic and ineffective, but also time-consuming. So we would have the proposal, we would propose the solution of improving assessment with a human factors assessment, starting from Morpheus, that we saw in Pillar 1, and the definition of digital twins and simulated phishing campaigns on the digital twins. So conducting phishing campaigns without involving users. And on the mitigation side, we can conduct LLM-generated phishing training programs that are also customized on the user. And also we can use tailored ethical phishing emails to target the specific vulnerabilities of the user. So as the two last studies that I will present for digital twins, this is still a work in progress, but basically we explore the machine learning based and the large language models based digital twins that could replicate the behavior of users in clicking or not clicking on a phishing email. And we found that actually machine learning models were performed better than large language models based digital twins, with about 77% accuracy. And finally, evaluation of LLM-generated training for phishing was conducted with a study with 480 users, using basically testing generic versus customized training. So we used different prompting strategies. Also, we compared short versus long training of users, and we measured the effectiveness of these training by measuring the pre and post training performance on email classification. And the main results told us that LLM training is very promising because it led from a minimum of 4% up to 11% of increasing in performance of the user. And also we found that long training, for example, was more effective than short training. But surprisingly, personalization was not better than using generic training. So we wanted to investigate that. So to briefly conclude, I know that I am 30 minutes in. In my research, and especially during my PhD, I tried to answer this question. How can human-centered cybersecurity help protect users from phishing attacks? And to do this, I presented several works that I completed during my PhD program to explore multifaceted aspects of phishing defense. And these can be actually put inside a workflow that starts with the figure of the user and then can go in a modeling of human factors of this user, which can also be used to create a digital twin of the user. And this digital twin can be, with this data, can be fed to generative models to either conduct phishing campaigns on specific attack tactics on the digital twins. So without even considering involving the user in these attacks. And also we can use generative models starting from these digital twins to generate adaptive user training programs. And on the other side, we also have that AI-based phishing detection systems can use basically user data to train the emails. And from this backend, we can go to a front end, let's say, because we can generate human-centered explanations, which can be injected in warning dialogues as we studied them. So at future work, we will go in studying warning customization, but also go in longitudinal in-field evaluation of this, because these were all controlled experiments. And but also there's a lot of work to be done in multimodal phishing detection, because we can have phishing, smishing, and so on. And also we should we will develop a comprehensive human factors questionnaire that can let all the factors in Morpheus, the relevant factors in Morpheus, which are 50, to be measured just in one time. And also we will have to refine the digital twin, but also the training customization, which led to kind of decent results, not optimal. And that was all. So thank you for your attention, and thanks for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesco. I thank you for the working group that is hosting this live meeting. Very interesting work. So I asked the people that is in the meeting if there is anyone that would like to ask questions to Francesco, or maybe I can start with one and give you some time to think a little bit about it. My question is, so you are working on trying to find automated ways to generate or and showing warnings to users that may be not aware of phishing attacks, and try to, let's say, explain them why an email seems a website seems deceptive. My question is, if you have explanation, so you are going from, let's say, a sort of black box that gives you whether or not the message could be trusted towards something that is interpretable for the users. Are you also opening, let's say, a new training field for people that want to produce deceptive content? So if you explain how your mechanism to detect you are exposing to new attacks, how you balance these things?
Oh yeah, thank you for the question. So you're actually asking if, like on a red team, these the same approaches that are used to defend the user. So explaining the causes, for example, for phishing attacks, can be used also by the red team. So basically, this is not something that we investigated, but we actually there are basically we have this situation on the adaptive simulated attacks, and here we also have the like the additional factor that we know the digital, like the company would know the digital twin, like the profile of the user, and so know their vulnerabilities and use them to actually conduct targeted attacks. And what like these are supposed to do, they're not just to like make the user, the employees fall for phishing, because if we know, like most ethical phishing campaigns actually rely on the concept that okay, we need to craft very convincing emails to make the employees fall for phishing. But I mean, we know for sure that even a security expert, if under the right circumstances, will fall for a phishing email if the context is well aligned, if they're expecting something and the mail gets to the user at the right time. So we should use, like in this case, for example, for a company, we should use this opportunity of generated targeting attacks to make the user fall for the email. Like 90% they will fall if it is very well constructed, and they'll then tell them, okay, look, you fell for, because you are very susceptible to, for example, the authority principle. Like if I fake to be your boss, you are likely to fake. So you will need to be careful in the future from emails that come from your boss. Okay, so on a red team, like more than on a red team, like you were talking about, maybe criminals that use these generative AI, absolutely. Like models do not do a very good job at preventing the generation of emails, of phishing emails. Maybe if you ask the like GPT to generate a phishing email, it will tell you, oh, look, I cannot do that for ethical purposes. But then you change in the prompt from phishing, you change to marketing, and it will generate whatever you want. So it's we have also to be careful. And this is actually in a study that we conducted, which was published at ITASEC 2 years ago. Yeah. We actually studied ways to use machine learning models to detect phishing emails that were generated by LLMs. And if we can, like, having an email that we know that an email is generated by an LLM, I mean, yeah, like today, a lot of people generate emails with LLMs, maybe because to well format it or to write them better. But if we tell to the user, wait, look, was generated by AI, maybe that would be like a red flag for them, which could be used. We did not investigate all these that research, but yeah, that would be a possibility. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Is there any other question? Okay, so I think that we thank you again, Francesco, and yeah, we say goodbye to our audience and stay tuned for more live talks. Thank you very much, Francesco.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.